Hello, good morning. Welcome here. So excited as every week. This week I thought I'm going to address a question I get just about every week from one of my clients or from someone in my groups. So I really want to address this today. And it is the difference, or how do we know the difference between us actually processing a trauma memory or something that's coming up for you, so it's a healing thing, versus us kind of ruminating, wallowing, or dwelling, overanalysing, or on the other extreme. I know quite a few people who spend years in monasteries or meditating and doing mindfulness exercises and never actually bypassing. Okay? So we want to know that the difference is there. So this might be a little bit of a blunt video, or it might be a little bit difficult to take. I don't know where you're at on your healing journey, but it comes from a place of love. You know, I don't want you to prolong your suffering unnecessary. That's the main aim. So let's get straight into this. But actually, first I want to mention, like I mentioned in so many videos before, but our brain does actually not know the difference between a past story, between what's happening right now, or something that you imagine might happen in the future, or a video that you're watching, or if you're playing video games. All those things they cause our brain to release chemical and create an emotional state, and the same one time and time again. Okay, so you want to keep that in the back of our minds there. Okay, so first, I think let's go into the. No, first I want to say it really breaks my heart when people come and tell me that, you know, they've been going to therapy for years and years, decades, and they don't feel like they have improved. They're still stuck. They're still having all these flashbacks and memories. Okay, because these days, or what often happens for people is they're going to therapy and they're telling their story, they're going back into that story, and they're trying to have those emotions that they had back then, and they kind of call this processing. Well, in the past, that was perhaps a legit practice. People believed that this is how we're going to heal trauma. There was exposure therapy, but today, you know, it's different. We have new science, we have new technology to do brain scans and things like that. We know that this is not the most appropriate treatment, especially for people who have complex PTSD, who had like a whole childhood full of traumatic events, and not the one-off event. Okay, if you had a one-off traumatic event, exposure therapy might be something that is very effective, but not for childhood trauma. Okay, so how do we know the difference? I can almost guarantee you, if you're feeling like you're wallowing or ruminating, you are. When we are processing trauma memories, this is a very short process. It goes for minutes. You know, it's not something that I do for days and weeks and things like that. Back when I was still in crisis, and I want to really highlight that this is a process. This is something that we can learn to get to. So this is always really difficult for me in the videos because I don't know where you're at. Right? With my clients, I can discuss that, so I can see where about you're at. But like I said, for me right now, it's a few minutes to do the process, but it wasn't always like that. Okay, when we first get diagnosed, when we're in that kind of crisis, when we have a lot of flashbacks and nightmares and things like that, that's actually not the right time to process trauma memories. You need to first actually learn to get a little bit of distance between you and that emotion. You know, because it feels like it's all consuming. It's this huge, gigantic thing. It just feels so overwhelming. It feels larger than you, or that's what it felt like for me. Let me know how you experience it, but it's really intense, or it can be numb as well. But let's go with that really intense emotion. We need to get to a place where we have that little bit of a distance there, and there's a lot of different practices that you can use. My favorite one is always like going into the body and kind of checking where that emotion, where do I feel it the strongest? Does it have a color? Does it have a shape? Does it have a texture? Is it hot, cold, spiky, slimy, and all this? And then I try to imagine getting that emotion, getting this thing out. Like if I have that sense that this is like a slimy plop, or this is a spiky hot thing, then I get this thing out in front of me. Either I hold it in my hands or I imagine having it on the table there, and then I do a process. Or if it's a story that comes up, we want to get a little bit of a distance between you and the story. So there's a breathing kind of space, so that you, instead of reacting, you're responding. And again, there's many different ways to do that. But I like when something comes up for me to check in. Oh, how old was I when I was I 5, 12, 26, whatever the age was? I imagine my younger self, and it's almost like I'm having a conversation with her. It's her story. It's part of me, but I get that little bit of a distance, so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. I hope that makes sense, because we want to get to a place where we can notice, okay, here is the emotion, here's the part having the emotion, and there's also an observer self. We have an observer who is observing that I am having that emotion. And when we get to that place, then we can kind of go into trying to process the trauma stories and move into that. Does that make sense? I hope it does. But we need to establish that first, and we need to be able to feel reasonably safe in the environment that we are in. If you're with a therapist, that in that room, that you learn to find ways to calm your nervous system a little bit before you go into processing. Otherwise, you're going to go there, and instead of processing, like I said, you're actually having this overwhelmed feeling. And if you have ever that sense that you feel the same way as you did back then, it almost feels like you're that younger self again. Sometimes I even acted or started speaking like I'm 6 years old. Okay, that is not actually healing. That is you reliving the event. That is re-traumatizing. That is strengthening that traumatic memory. Okay, it's not actually helping you store it and you reclaiming your life. So because the aim for us is to have being able to enjoy the here and now, right? We want to be able to be in the present moment, have our quality of life. But when we're having lots of flashbacks, there is no quality of life, because you're living in the past. You're having the same emotional sensations in your body. You're just stuck in the past. But we want to be able to actually see the beautiful things out there and enjoy life, be in a conversation with people. And that is not possible when we are still reliving and fully living in the past there. Okay, so every time you have that sense, that is actually strengthening your that memory. So be very wary if your therapist constantly wants to go back into those stories. That is strengthening the story. That's not healing it. There's no healing in the story. I really want you to get that. You retelling your story, there's no healing in that. Okay. This might be really nice the first time you see a therapist telling your story and have someone validate that for you. Oh yeah, that was bad, that was horrible, that shouldn't have happened, that was criminal, that was abuse. To help you label that. That validation might really, there's some healing in that. But after that, retelling your story, there's no healing. Okay? So when I do that process, when I check in, how old was I when that story, in that story that comes up, when I imagine myself in front of me, I'm not getting that my younger self tell that story again. I want to establish a connection with my younger self, because you are the best person. You're actually the only person who knows exactly what you would have needed in that moment to feel safer, to feel loved, to feel appreciated, to feel protected, or whatever it is what you needed back then. But you're the only person who knows that. No one else knows that better than you. Okay? So it might take you a little while to get that connection with yourself, with your younger self, to establish that. But then it's the healing is in us giving that younger self what she would have needed. That completes that trauma story loop. That lets your brain then store that memory in a way so it doesn't keep coming up in flashbacks and nightmares, and it doesn't no longer intrude in your day-to-day living, so you can enjoy that. It does not take away the trauma, and it doesn't minimize it. Okay, you intellectually still know that back then in childhood you had no one who protected you or soothed you. That was not there, that was absent. But your brain does not know the difference between that this was happened and you now giving that story a different ending. So they're totally okay to do that for yourself, as in choosing, helping to settle the nervous system. That's what we're doing. We're settling the nervous system. We still know that this was not okay. It's just to help us kind of heal those wounds. I hope that makes sense. So I don't want to take away, or sometimes people say, oh, it means like I'm pretending it didn't happen. No, we're not pretending it didn't happen. We're just helping. We're giving our younger self the soothing that she didn't have back then, to help our nervous system to store that memory properly, so it doesn't keep intruding in our day-to-day life. So there's a lot of different practices, a lot of different processes and things that you can explore there. If one thing doesn't, whatever I shared, what my go-tos are, what I like is that I, when a memory comes up or something that I ruminate on, I always use one of those. But there's also another thing that we need to really aware of, is to get to a place that we actually know what we want instead. And that's often missing in therapy. In therapy, they go and we talk about what happened in the past and giving you some tools, but they often miss addressing okay, who do you actually want to become? What do you want your future to look like? Because we want to have a vision towards which we are heading. Otherwise, we're constantly feeling lost, and the only place to go to is back going to that trauma stories, okay, instead of actually creating something different there. I think that was a lot today, and I talk really fast too. But I think I really want you to understand that when we're having that sense that things are overwhelming, then it's not actually healing. When you ever did a process that was healing, you know that it's a totally different feeling within yourself. You have that inner knowing that I processed this. I just created some healing for myself. You just know. It's very different than that all the other things that we are doing when we're trying to analyze why did this happen, and why did that person not help or say something, and why did this person do that and not this, and these when we're going into those kind of things, they're just unhelpful thought patterns that our brain goes into, and it doesn't mean harm. Our brain's main function is to protect us and to save energy, calories. That's what the brain does. So every time our brain brings up a story, I also always thank my brain for working so hard to trying to protect me, right? Because it brings those stories up to protect me. But it's now my adult self. I need to check in and say, does that story help me right now to actually, or is there actually any danger, to really scan the room first and notice if there's something. Is there something that I need to pay attention to or not? And then I thank my brain, and it's like, yeah, I like to call them false alarms. I just say, thank you, brain, but it's a false alarm. It's safe. We can keep going. We can keep doing what we plan to do. And just one more quick tip here. When we're in this kind of more frantic kind of state, when a memory comes up, our anxiety goes up, where we get whether it's more hypervigilant or your anxiety goes up, we have the tendency to really frantically look around. Okay, the way we move, the way we do things, gives our brain feedback as well that, oh, there must be something dangerous because she's moving so fast and she's scanning. So it has this feedback loop there. We want to interrupt that. And when there's something comes up, by you actually slowing this down and you really slowly scanning the room, looking from one end to the other. And I usually like to look for something, anything that I can spot that is in my favorite color or something. But when we slow this down, it sends a different feedback back to the brain. Oh, she's actually really calm. Maybe it's safe. Maybe it's not dangerous. Okay, so we want to interrupt those automatic feedback patterns that we go into. That was just one of mine, so that might not be you. Just saying that. My friends always used to say I used to run around like a headless chook. So everyone kind of expresses them slightly different, but I think that's why it's so important that we have a person to work with that, whether this is your therapist, whether you're working with a coach, a psychologist, or whoever it is there for you. But because they can spot that, they have that observer perspective on what is happening for you, because sometimes we are so immersed in that we can't see it. We can't see it when you're fully in it. So having another person pointing this out to us gently, lovingly, we don't, and can hold that space with us there, and that can be really, really helpful there for us. So anyway, I will check in later if you have any questions, or if you have some tips for us to share too. Maybe what is it that you do when a memory comes up? What is the go-to practice that you find really helpful? Perhaps share that with us so we can all learn from each other. Like I said, everyone has something different that they find helpful, or they resonate with more, because we're all so unique as well. Okay? So with that, I'm sending you lots and lots of love and rainbows to brighten up the tough times just a little. See you guys. Bye.